On the grass at Wimbledon, there's a rule that nobody ever says out loud, but everyone around the sport understands. You're allowed to dream. You're allowed to surprise people. You might even pull off an upset once in a while. But you're not supposed to walk into the second week of the world's most prestigious tennis tournament and rewrite the script everyone has already accepted. That privilege belongs to champions, to legends, to players whose names are already carved into history, not to a 21-year-old from Quezon City. And yet, on Saturday afternoon, that's exactly what Alex Eala did. She stepped onto center court carrying nothing more than a racket, years of sacrifice, and a belief almost nobody outside her own team shared. Across the net stood everything Alex was expected to become one day. Not today. One day. The reigning Wimbledon champion. The world number 3. A 6-time Grand Slam winner. A player whose career was already filled with the kind of moments most professionals spend a lifetime chasing. On paper, this wasn't supposed to be a contest. It was supposed to be another routine step toward another Wimbledon title. Alex Eala wasn't expected to write the story. She was supposed to become another chapter inside someone else's. Instead, she became the headline. Not because the match was close. Not because the champion had a bad day. And certainly not because luck suddenly landed on her side. She became the headline because she walked onto the biggest stage in tennis. Looked one of the greatest players in the world straight across the net. And beat her. In straight sets. But the result alone isn't what made this unforgettable. The real story started much earlier. It started inside an opening set that lasted 84 exhausting minutes. A set where neither player gave the other room to breathe. Every game felt important. Every rally carried pressure. The favorite couldn't pull away. The underdog refused to back down. Instead, Alex matched one of the best players in the world point for point. Serve for serve. Rally for rally. Until the set reached a dramatic tiebreak. 11 points to 9. Both players saved set points. Both players refused to surrender. With every passing minute, center court stopped watching a routine Wimbledon match. It started watching belief collide with experience. Because Wimbledon has a way of exposing doubt. If it exists, sooner or later, center court finds it. Alex never allowed it to. When the biggest points arrived, she played them like she belonged. And when the tiebreak finally ended, the first set belonged to Alex Eala. That wasn't just a lead on the scoreboard. It was proof. Proof that this wasn't a lucky afternoon. Proof that she belonged on the biggest stage in tennis. Still, champions are famous for responding. Everyone inside the stadium expected the defending champion to take control. Surely experience would settle things down. Surely this was where reality would return. Instead, Alex played even freer. She attacked, trusted her ground strokes, stepped inside the baseline whenever she saw an opening. Most importantly, she never started protecting the lead. That's the mistake so many underdogs make. The finish line comes into view. And instead of chasing victory, they begin trying not to lose. Alex never fell into that trap. She kept attacking. She earned an early break. Held serve. Forced the champion to keep chasing the match. Little by little, the impossible stopped looking impossible. It started looking inevitable. Until finally, 6 games to 2. The defending Wimbledon champion was out. Alex Eala was through. For a few seconds. She didn't celebrate. She didn't scream. She simply stood there. Almost frozen. As if her mind needed a moment to catch up with what the scoreboard already knew. Then the racket slipped from her hand. And moments later, the tears followed. There are victories you celebrate. And then there are victories so overwhelming that celebration becomes impossible. On the most famous court in tennis, in front of thousands inside the stadium, Alex Eala cried. Not because she had won, because she understood exactly what that victory meant. For herself, for her family, for everyone who had believed in her long before the world ever did. But here's where this story takes an unexpected turn. Because the match itself, as extraordinary as it was only half the reason the entire world suddenly started paying attention. The moment that truly transformed Alex Eala into a global story came only a few minutes later. With a microphone in her hand, standing on center court, still wiping away tears, Alex wasn't asked about tactics. Nobody wanted to hear about first serve percentages. Nobody wanted a breakdown of the tiebreak. People wanted to know the person behind the performance. And Alex answered by going back to where everything began. Back to the Philippines. Back to the afternoons she spent hitting tennis balls after school. Back to the countless hours on court with her brother and grandfather. long before television cameras, center court, or Grand Slam headlines were ever part of the picture. She smiled as she remembered being a little girl in ruffled socks and light-up shoes. A child who wasn't dreaming about making history. She simply loved playing tennis. Then she said something that explained why this victory meant so much. For someone like Iga Swiatek, a champion with multiple Grand Slam titles, wins eventually become part of an already remarkable career. But for a little girl from the Philippines, a moment like this meant everything. For a few seconds, center court wasn't listening to an athlete. It was listening to a dream finally catching up with reality. Most post-match interviews end there. A smile. A thank you. One last wave to the crowd. But Alex stopped herself. She took a breath, smiled, and reminded everyone that this story wasn't over. I'm not satisfied. Then came 4 words that perfectly captured her mindset. Next round. Let's go. While everyone else was celebrating history, Alex was already thinking about tomorrow. That mentality may have impressed people even more than the victory itself. Because history can become heavy. The moment athletes realize they've done something extraordinary, expectations begin to follow them everywhere. Alex refused to carry that weight. She simply moved on to the next challenge. And at the exact same time, something extraordinary was happening beyond the court. This match had escaped the world of tennis. It was becoming a global story. People who had never followed Alex Eala before suddenly wanted to know who she was. The proof was sitting in the stands. Andrew Garfield was there. Tom Hiddleston too. 2 of Hollywood's biggest stars, watching a 4th-round Wimbledon match that had suddenly become much bigger than tennis. Then came another surprise. Anna Wintour. For decades, one of the most influential figures in global fashion. When Anna Wintour appears somewhere, people pay attention, because her presence usually means the event has become culturally significant. And on this afternoon, that event was Alex Eala's match. Simone Ashley was there as well, another globally recognized actress from a completely different audience. By now, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Hollywood had noticed. Fashion had noticed. But the reactions that mattered most were still to come. Because admiration is one thing. Recognition from champions is something entirely different. Maria Sharapova watched Alex's performance and later described her with 3 simple words. A real star. Coming from a 5-time Grand Slam champion and former Wimbledon winner. Those words carried enormous weight. But one detail made that moment even more emotional. Years earlier, there was a photograph of a young Alex standing beside Sharapova, a little girl meeting one of her heroes. Now, that same hero was calling her a star. The child who once looked up at a champion was now being welcomed by one. Then another legend joined the conversation. Billie Jean King, a pioneer who changed women's tennis forever. After watching Alex's victory, she called the match a treat to watch. Simple words, but from someone whose opinion has shaped generations of champions. They meant everything. And then came perhaps the most meaningful message of all. Manny Pacquiao, the greatest Filipino athlete of his generation. An 8-division boxing world champion who understood exactly what it feels like to carry the hopes of an entire nation. After Alex's victory, he publicly showed his support. It felt like more than congratulations. It felt like one national icon recognizing the arrival of another. Different sport, different era, same flag, same dream. And when you stepped back and looked at all those names together, Hollywood stars, fashion icons, tennis legends, and the greatest sporting hero the Philippines has ever produced. They had all arrived at the same conclusion. Alex Eala wasn't simply having the tournament of her life. She was becoming one of the biggest stories in world sport. But what made that story truly historic had nothing to do with the celebrities watching from the stands. And once you understand that, every famous face inside center court suddenly makes perfect sense. Because they weren't there simply to watch another Wimbledon match. They were there for the moment a new story introduced itself to the world. But celebrity attention wasn't the biggest achievement of Alex Eala's week. History was. By reaching the round of 16, Alex became the first Filipino player, man or woman, to reach this stage at Wimbledon in the Open era. Think about that. More than 50 years of professional tennis. Generations of Filipino players. Thousands of matches. Countless dreams. Yet no one had ever gone this far. Until Alex. For decades, the Philippines produced champions in many sports. Olympians. Basketball stars. Boxing legends. But Wimbledon always felt different. It felt like a stage reserved for countries with deep tennis traditions. Countries that regularly produced Grand Slam champions. The Philippines wasn't supposed to be part of that conversation. Now, it had no choice but to be. Almost overnight, the questions surrounding Alex completely changed. Nobody was asking, can she compete with the best? She had already answered that. Nobody was asking, does she belong here? Center court had already answered that too. Now there was only one question left. How far can she go? Because suddenly, the quarterfinals didn't feel impossible. The semifinals no longer sounded unrealistic. Even the final had entered the conversation. Not because anyone expected it, but because Alex had forced everyone to stop placing limits on what seemed possible. Yet through all the excitement, Alex never changed. She never spoke about lifting the trophy. She never called herself a history maker. She never allowed the headlines to become her focus. Instead, she kept repeating the same message. The next match. The next opponent. The next challenge. That sounds simple, but it's exactly how champions think. Because deep tournament runs aren't built by celebrating yesterday. They're built by staying locked in on today. And that's why Monday feels so important. Waiting on the other side of the net is Jasmine Paolini. For the first time in this remarkable run, Alex won't walk onto the court as a complete unknown. Her opponent knows exactly what she's capable of. The crowd knows. The media knows. The entire tennis world knows. The freedom of being the surprise package is gone. Now comes a completely different kind of pressure. Can she stay fearless when everyone expects another miracle? Can she ignore the headlines and play with the same freedom that carried her this far? Those are the questions waiting to be answered. And maybe that's why 4 simple words from her post-match interview mattered more than anyone realized. Next round. Let's go. While the world celebrated the biggest victory of her career, Alex had already turned the page. Because that's what champions do. They don't spend their energy protecting history. They keep building it. And that's why this story feels bigger than one incredible upset. It's bigger than defeating a defending Wimbledon champion. It's even bigger than becoming the first Filipino player to reach this stage of the tournament. It's about what happens when one athlete changes the way an entire nation thinks. Somewhere in the Philippines, another little girl is probably picking up a tennis racket today. And for the first time, she knows someone from her country has already stood on center court. Already defeated one of the world's best. Already proven that this dream is possible. That may be Alex Eala's greatest victory. Because records can eventually be broken. Trophies can eventually belong to someone else. But inspiration lasts far longer. Years from now, people may forget exactly where Andrew Garfield was sitting. Or which celebrities filled the royal box. But they'll remember why they were there. They happened to witness the afternoon the world discovered Alex Eala. Some victories change a tournament. Some change a career. But every once in a while, one victory changes what an entire nation believes is possible. And no matter what happens against Jasmine Paolini, that story has already begun. The world finally knows Alex Eala's name. Now it's waiting to see how far she can take it.